G'day everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me back to the West to come and talk to you all about my experience in sparkling wine production. A lot of things you've seen today all apply to what I try and do, but everything's on a different scale, as you've just heard. So I'm just going to briefly run you through my background and then talk about the big considerations we've all heard about, but with a small budget, which is what my experience is. I don't think I need to talk about sales and marketing much anymore because that was just covered on how to do it the absolutely right way. And style we've looked at, but I've just got a couple of points that might add more thought to it. And then I thought, in a reflective mode, I'd talk about what I think we've done right in our process and what we could probably change. So I actually grew up catching the bus and hanging out down here, which I think is pretty familiar to most of you. And then progressed into hiding from the bouncers at the OBH. I spent 1 year here doing ag science before I realised I wasn't that interested in wheat and sheep. Back in 1994, I couldn't do a winemaking degree here, and some of you might have all had to travel interstate for that. I took a year off and actually went and lived in Cremont, which is actually the village here that that Champagne Giminet that we were tasting is from. I used to drive past that bottle every day, and my house was down the bottom of that vineyard, and the school I went to was in Avise. So I was accepted to stay and study in Champagne at the Lycée Viticole d'Avise. I was the only foreigner there, and it was all in French. But the school made about 150,000 bottles of champagne, so a lot of my training was in the cellar. We were actually graded on how well we riddled and how we could do tirage and everything like that. Came back home, around the corner. Made wine with my old man for about 4 years. And I do believe that this is a brilliant place to make sparkling wine, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it back with me, but I do have some 1996 Blanc de Blanc that I made that's still on yeast lees from Manji, and it holds up. And then I fell in love with this guy and moved across to our home. Oops, how do I go back? Oh well. Yeah, so this is our property in the Adelaide Hills. The buildings up the top there, they existed. It was an old dairy property. This is 2010. We bought it in 2004. So we just planted the vineyard a couple of years before. And the trees you can see down the bottom, they're actually truffle-infused oak trees. And the cellar door we started building that year. This is a photo I took the other day. This is just showing you the top half. This is now the winery facility. As we all have been talking about, there's a lot of stock to hang on to, so I didn't realise how much I'd fall in love with sheds. I always said, Hamish would be better off with a wife with a shoe fetish, cheaper than me. And that's the cellar door. That photo was taken last year. So every dollar that we've earned has gone back into buildings pretty much, and lawn. So I thought you might be interested in my experience today that I can share is sort of what's the least you can get away with if you want to get into making sparkling wine, because as we've heard, it's very expensive and the equipment's capital intensive. And, you can't see the picture here, sorry, the background looks very faint. Do any of you use a tirage hydrometer? No. Anyway, in Champagne, most of my mates, it's all they use. It's just a very, very, very high-performing hydrometer so that you can get your base wine density level, and then when you're adding your sugar for tirage, you can get pretty close to what you're targeting. One thing I do remember being here was how far you are away from getting things analysed. Where I am now, I'm 15 minutes from the AWRI. So I use my tirage hydrometer, but I'm also getting my glute fruits checked if I don't want to do them on my own spectro. And that's just a bench crown sealer capper. That one's actually electric, so you don't even need an air supply. And I've put a microscope up there because I do love looking at my yeast before I go into bottle, just to make sure they're all budding. Even though you're following the ferment and the yeast culture smells healthy, I like to check it. And we do tirage about 80,000 bottles a year. And I'll show you this quick video. 2 of my daughters cameo. This is a 14-year-old. So I've got 2 6-head Morries in series. This is the Vigiling crown sealing machine. I agree with Mick, absolutely believe in the Vigil. She was running quite slowly then while I was filming, but that person operating that machine, when they know what they're doing, can run at 1,100 bottles an hour. And this next video is going to show you just exactly the number of things that they are thinking about at the time. I won't press play yet, so that's Tom sitting there. He's got his hand on, that's the bidulling dispensing carousel. So as that runs down, he's glancing up, and when it's out, he's got to turn it. And the vibrating bowl just there, I'll press play. I bought this about 3 years ago, because up until then I used to have someone feeding in the crown seals, because 1,100 an hour is a lot. But I found this vibrating bowl, which shapes them into the right position and feeds them into the machine. But that's actually being run by a pedal that Tom's pressing when he runs out of capsules. So that person is doing more than that. And 1,100 bottles an hour, that's why we're wearing full face shields, because we do have bottles sometimes hit the wrong spot. The other part of sparkling wine, I'm not talking about base wine production for this presentation. If you want to ask me about anything, we can talk about it later, but I really was focusing on the processes that are unique to sparkling wine today. Disgorging and labelling, and this is where we start getting really expensive with equipment. But you really can get away with the disgorging tool, and you've probably all got one of these or a similar gadget. And if you don't have a neck freezer, you can do it à la volée, so you can chase the yeast up and blow the yeast out that way. And you can also do hand labelling, hand washing. If you can't afford a corking machine, you can put a crown seal back on. It's probably not the marketing look you want, but I'm talking about the minimum you can get away with. So this first video just shows my daughter putting the hoods on using this machine. But you do need obviously compressed air for this process. While it's on freeze frame, that neck freezer there was built around the corner here. My dad made it when we got back from Champagne. So this is actually, this whole video, which I've got on 2-speed for you, is a chronological story of us. This has only been running in a single line that you're about to see for 12 months. Got it really fast speed. So this is dosing and topping. A very efficient sponge to stop it falling off the edge of the carousel. I'll come back to this machine because it is the actual best thing in the world. A couple of heaters because you never like the bottle getting cold before the label goes on. That's the sound of the machine stopping because the star wheel just got caught. That's Laurie, who's now on maternity leave. I'll just hold it there for a second. We used to have, you would have seen it, I don't know if you noticed, when Trina showed the GH Mum bottling line, disgorging line, there was a point when all the bottles were being inverted like this, which is mixing the dosing liquor. I do have a machine that mixes the liquor, but it doesn't fit in the line. And also to stop people hurting themselves now, what happens when the cartons come out, we roll the cartons 3 times. That's the way of them not hurting their wrists and us actually mixing the liquor in that way. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back with this to the beginning of the video. No. I'll keep going. I can show you again afterwards, but when I was using the laptop, I could go back and freeze it. So now I'm going to talk about things that you can't get away without having. And firstly is refrigeration. Disgorging in warmer seasons, and especially in Australia, if the wine's too warm, your losses are incredible. You can be up around 7 or 8%. We chill our wines down below 5 degrees. We get them down to 4 sometimes. And if I've done a good job at tirage and it riddles nicely and the wine's not too energetic, I can be down at 0.5% loss and topping. And also the neck freezer really does improve the quality outcomes and the efficiencies because you can then mechanise. Doing it à la volée, you need somebody inspecting every single bottle a lot more than by using a neck freezer. And it was really another thing that was interesting, the size of the ice block in the Mum line. When you see how far that had to travel, you can see why it has a big ice block. I'm actually fastidious and I check my neck freezer liquid height to minimise that ice block because it minimises my losses. So my ice block, because it's really quick between coming out of the ice bucket, neck freezer, to being disgorged, doesn't have time to melt. So you can get away with the smaller one. And I really do suggest considering solar. Has anybody here got a solar set up on their winery yet? You have? Yeah, it's pretty energy demanding, sparkling wine. And the other thing I mentioned before, buildings. Things I just did not think about when I was going into becoming a winemaker. You have to think about where you're going to store your tirage stock and your equipment. When you've invested this money in the equipment, you don't want it to sit out in the rain. And the buildings that I showed you before, they're actually all constructed, now the new one's out of Bondor, which is 100 mil refrigeration panel, so ceiling and side panels. That's another thing you can't go without, sparkling. Inventory is really, really important to think about. Hamish and I, when we set out, we made 200 dozen. The next year we made 250 dozen. And then we made 400 dozen. And then in 2014, Deviation took us on as our distributor, and we started having more confidence and we started making more wine. But you're always making more than you're selling that time. So what I'm bottling this year is not what I'm selling this year, or what I'm anticipating in 3 and 5 years. So inventory is massive consideration. You've got the space, you've got to find somewhere to put it all, and it depends how you're going to stack it. So this shed here, we can fit 7 timber bins wide, we can go 5 high, and we can come 6 deep. So we can, in this whole shed I can get about a lot of money's worth of bottles stored, a couple of 100,000 bottles or something. I'm depleting that at the moment because I'm about to go into tirage and I need to bring this year's in. And the financial considerations, you've got to make your decision on how long you want to age your wines on lees for 2 reasons. One, to hit your style, and the other, that you can afford to make the wine ongoing. The reason we survived a Deviation Road is because Hamish had that economic reality. If it was up to me, we would be broke, because I was Cote de Blanc trained. I wanted to have 7 years on lees minimum for everything. But now we reserve that just for a small amount of our production. But we started out with Loftia being 18 months on lees. It's now at 3, and that's where I want it. And funding the growth. So we've actually funded it with the bank and by organically growing slowly, as slow as we can. Sales and marketing, I just brought that up quickly because I think the reason Deviation Road is actually working is because Hamish just comes from a sales and marketing background. So he already had that in his mind when we started making the product. When I was with Dad in Manjimup, he's an engineer background. He thought, you make wine, you follow the process, everything works. There was never a conversation about selling it. I actually took myself off on a surprise holiday to Melbourne and Sydney and found a distributor without telling him. And that's how I met Hamish. So I was pretty smart. So think about what your story is. You know, it's competitive out there. If you're going to go into sparkling winemaking and you want to make it commercial, what is it that makes it unique and related to you? Think about your sales strategy. Are you going to go into distribution? Or have you got a great cellar door and you're doing this just for your cellar door so you can sell the story there? Or are you thinking that you want to go into export, and that is really hard? And again, marketing strategy just comes back into tying those 2 things together. And you know, if you could replicate Fix, you would. It's brilliant. Style, taste widely. If you really are getting into sparkling wine, know a lot about the different styles out there, and start with what you can get from within your region, because that's the biggest indicator of what the style parameters are that you can probably work with. Look broadly for inspiration and stay open-minded, because there are a lot of different sparkling wines out there and they're all selling. So the market is open-minded to different styles. We've got pet nats, we've got wooded styles, you've seen them all today. So don't feel like you have to stick with one particular style. And of course, this all comes back into knowing your sites. That's self-explanatory. You know, if you've got a very, very cool site making very, very tight, fine, lean, citrus-style wines, you're not going to develop a great big Charles Heidsieck sort of broad, rich, sparkling wine, okay? So you've got to adapt yourself at the end of the day to what your fruit can give you to match that style. So where we've probably gone right, 100%, 2,000% prioritised quality. Nothing ever makes it into a bottle that's not top standard. And we've also stayed true to the style that we make, so the customers really do rely on us for that particular style of wine when they want it. We've grown moderately each year, although the inventory might say otherwise. It's quite terrifying at the moment. We're very lucky getting the distribution arrangement with Negotiants. We've got a team of about 5 permanent at the moment. 2 of them are full-time and the rest are permanent part-times, and we have a lot of casuals. You guys have got a real problem here with the mining industry taking all of your labour force. I'm very lucky as well, being 15 minutes from the uni. So my cellar door is run by 3 first, second and third year uni students, and they also come up and jump on the tirage and the disgorging line. And I'm close to the city, so I do have that advantage. and we only employ people we trust, because that's really important. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with sparkling wine. Safety reasons. You know, like I'm not on site at the moment, and I've had people cross-flowing and stacking cages. I wouldn't be able to leave if I didn't have somebody I knew was following process without me on site. Things we could change. This is not a therapy session, so I've only got 2 points here. Hamish walked in when I was doing this and we started talking about we could get divorced. No, just joking. We probably could have had a stronger cash flow product, and that would be a still wine. I can't bring myself to release a sparkling wine under sort of 18 months on lease. It's just not what I sort of perpetuate. But Pinot Gris, Sauv Blanc, we probably could have worked them a little bit harder in the background to keep the cash flow going, even, you know, to help fund it. And we could have possibly won the lotto. I suppose to summarise, you've heard all about the challenges, and you can see how tricky it is to make it, and then you've got to go and sell it. So as far as wine styles go, it keeps you busier than any other wine style, and it keeps you probably poorer for longer than any other wine style. But the benefits, if you make it work, are an incredible feeling of success as a winemaker, because it is hard to make. And then if you make some money at the end, it's fantastic. So we're hoping that that's the trajectory we're on. That's it. And I had a question slide, but I think we're doing group questions. So there we go. Thank you.